One thing I try and do in every session that I create is give people an opportunity to work quietly themselves alongside any chat they might have with anyone else. So you'll always have the option just to add to the Padlet if that's how you want to engage today. You don't have to converse, you can use the chat function, et cetera, et cetera. There's no assumption that you're going to be spending all your time with your camera on having a chat. So that's the Padlet we're going to use today. If you're using the Slack, it will also be in the Slack later on, so that you can return to it there. You don't need to worry about memorizing it or anything like that. So if everyone's all right, we're just going to go get started. First, I'd like to say thank you to my middle child, who's the one climbing the stairs there. One of the things I find helpful in delivering these trainings is to bring them with me, my kids, by using their pictures, but I always ask first. So you'll probably meet him if you guys do a lot of MyFest. My kids love MyFest. They love poking in and having their heads on the camera. So anytime they're home, you'll probably see them. That was when he was first learning how to go up the stairs. So you can see him, yes, you can see him leaning against the wall. And one of the things that's so interesting is how obviously every child sort of approaches this differently. So my eldest did that, like you crawl very quickly until suddenly you're walking. Sort of he relied on momentum. But Mordecai is a little more deliberate in his thinking. So he would take one full step, get both feet up there, lean on the wall, then do another step, get both feet up there, lean on the wall. And when I was thinking about this idea of an elegant step, one thing I wanted to make sure happened was that we each felt our approach would work. So this is not about the best way to do it, but this is about your way and giving you tools that will help you do things in a way that you feel comfortable. I have 3 children, and my third child, Kara, I don't know when she started walking up steps. I feel like I just turned around and she was going up and down ladders. So her method was just like, oh, my brothers can do it, so I'm fine. I will also do it. So I really want everyone to take away today feeling quite confident. So with that in mind, see how well this works. Whoa. So I've also never really presented with this. I wanted to start with the definition of emergent strategy from Adrienne Marie Brown. So this is a picture of a quote from her book. There's no alt text on Gamma, which is annoying for images. So I'm just going to describe what it is. So there's a snapshot of the cover of her book off to the side. You can only see part of it. It has an indication of the book's name, so Emergent Strategy, and Adrienne Marie Brown's name on the bottom. And then it just has the quote. And it says, an elegant step is one that acknowledges what is known and unknown and what the capacity of this group actually is. And one thing I think is lovely about this is 2 things. She poses the perspective that this is elegant. So this is not sufficient or efficient or effective or enough or inspirational or anything. This is elegant. And elegant is a really interesting word to apply to movement, yes, and to apply to growth or change. And I think one of the things that is nice to embrace about this idea is that staying within your capacity and understanding, while acknowledging, where you still need to learn, is elegance when it comes to movement and change and pushing for change elsewhere. I think a lot of times we assume or we push for the maximum change possible. We feel we're being aspirational. We ask for a big reach. But I think this idea that actually the elegance comes in the small steps in some cases, and in acknowledging where you are and as a group what you can do is a really powerful image. So I wanted to center a discussion on MyFest around it. So that's the definition that she gives. What I'd like to do first, though, is have a little discussion around what steps can be taken. One thing I think is really interesting is I've done similar trainings like this with other groups. I sometimes do them with academic staff. So I should probably say, for my context, I work at a really large university in the UK. It's the University of Manchester. I have a very strange job. I'm the head of teaching and learning development for the library, which essentially means any teaching the library does, I get my nose poked into and have opinions on. And then I'm also what's called an academic lead for student success. And that means I have a portfolio of projects and responsibilities that include sort of academic development and skills, academic advising, welcome induction and transition, belonging, and a few other things in the 1.5 days a week they have accorded me to that role. And I do a lot of work with people about change and facilitating change and supporting change. And it wasn't until I read this book that I started thinking about sort of metacognitively, yes, what assumptions do we make when we're thinking about what to do next? What kind of pressure do we put on ourselves or inadvertently put on others? And I do think this framing allows us to both discuss and remove some of those assumptions that might be making things not work, not because the step wasn't the correct one, but because we didn't have this thoughtful discussion around what we know and don't know and what we can actually do with the people we have here, not with an ideal group, that might exist somewhere else. So I was hoping we could get together. Oh, Virginia, go ahead.
Just when you're talking about steps, I'm thinking like in terms of because I know in Britain that you have a different educational system, but I'm thinking in the US, especially, you have sort of the individual step, and then you have the group, the whole class, and where they're at. So you a lot of times will teach towards the middle. A lot of people do teach towards the middle. But then what happens to the people at either end of there in terms of, like maybe people at the top are more, they want a larger step and they want to go further, and then those at the bottom. So I know an example would be I teach a entry-level course for our department, which is it's a communication department, but it's a speech class. And I have people that come in who have never given any presentations in their life. They come from really large inner city schools. They just never had the time to teach students about that. And then I have people like the one girl who gave the keynote speech for the incoming freshmen. So obviously, this is a class of about 5,000 students. So, or the cohort is about 5,000 students. So when you're talking about steps, I guess my question is, are you looking at the group or are you looking at the individuals?
I think that's such an interesting question. So this original concept was around like community work. So Adrienne Marie Brown did a lot with around sort of community engagement and Black Lives Matter and other movements. And I think for her, although I do think it's worth us taking and morphing to work for us, for her, this is about what can the people in the room do towards a common goal, which is often linked to a movement or a problem or a local context, that everyone agrees needs working on, either to increase it or to address it. In a classroom setting, so I used to teach year 7 before I moved to the UK, and I understand what you mean about teaching to the middle or trying very hard to, not leave anyone behind, but also not disengage those who feel more ready. And I think I would argue that although we in this case, thinking of this particular metaphor, that the power in this metaphor is not that each of us are on an individual journey, but that we're working towards an agreed outcome. And that if you are further along, that's something to celebrate. And it means that instead of moving forward, you might be pulling, you might be supporting others to join you. You might be enhancing where you are so that when others do join you, it's more inclusive for them. There's a lot of work that can be done without perhaps encouraging us all being in an individual line, like a queue, to return to the UK roots of my original introduction. And I wonder if when you're thinking of this metaphor within teaching, that you think about, okay, we have our own learning goals, right? We have students, they want to learn this, they want to improve, but we so often focus those on each of our individual learning journeys. But if we have a collective goal for the class and you can get agreement on it, then it could turn into something else entirely. And I'm reminded of the last class I got to teach before I moved to the UK, who were beautiful. They were, it was just very regular students, they'd all kind of traveled through and they got to year 7 and everything was fine. They were very regular. Quite a few of them, a few grade levels behind in the reading, but catching up, all of that kind of stuff. And next door to me was a class. We were an inclusive school, so we had some severely physically disabled students who were next door in their own classroom where they could have all the tools that they needed to engage. And my students asked, so what's the difference? They're 14, so they were like, well, what's going on? How's this working? I said, well, we're all working towards learning together. And they said, well, can we learn together? And I was just like, yes. Yes. So they came up with those other students with a project that we all worked on together. And, we went into that classroom every day because that's where the accessibility tools were. And they all worked on the project together. And my top ones, you could have argued that they didn't get anything out of it academically, except they were busy organizing all the other kids. And, there was a lot to be said. And then also they recalibrated what it meant to be, the top, because it wasn't anymore about answering the questions all the time. We had a different goal. And I wonder if that is something that could be really helpful in a classroom, especially when we feel pressured these days to always push and demonstrate. In the UK, it's educational gain. So always be able to demonstrate that. I think sometimes the only way to succeed at in that sort of pressure is to also have a secondary goal that feels more community-based and collective. So this could do that. I think at the same time, you could make arguments for all of us are on a different journey. If you want to keep the metaphor going, we'll all be walking at different rates, all that kind of thing. But I really appreciate that question, because I've mostly dealt with this on being brought into places that want to make a change. So it's me sort of slowing them down and being like, what does it, what are you agreeing to do? How are we going to get there? But thinking about it in an educational context is really powerful. So thank you. And also, I haven't sent you your $10 yet, but the next question that we're going to ask ourselves, seeing if this works. Ta-da! So elegance aside, what are some steps? So one thing I think is really interesting is a lot of assumptions around what it looks like to move forward. If you're familiar with growth mindset, which if you're in teaching, you definitely are, Virginia. Growth mindset is a quite old concept now that Carol Dweck first looked at. It's reasonably controversial. And it has a lot to do with like, if you keep trying, you'll get better versus feeling like you're only as good as you are. And there's a lot embedded in that. But one of the nuances around this metaphor that we have around growth is this assumption of up or forward. And sometimes you have to take a step back, don't you, or sideways or whatever, in order to do what you need to do. And so I think sometimes when we are thinking about what to do next, we're always trying to move ahead, whether or not that's what we want to do. So I just wanted to spend some time as a group. You can either use the Padlet where I've dropped the link in the chat, or you can go ahead and just have a, raise your hand or put something in the chat now, brainstorming like what are some steps. So if you're an individual and you're working towards a goal, and it can be something we're going to get to a chance for us to share. So it can be something you're thinking about right now where you're trying to make a change or an improvement, or you're part of a group already. What are things that you find yourself doing? Is it researching an area? What are the things that you can kind of do by yourself to move either yourself or some amorphous thing forward? But then making that bigger, what changes when it becomes a group of people? What changes when it becomes an institution, which are historically extremely difficult to move? And then finally, what changes when you start thinking of us as a society, all working together or pulling in different directions? What are the sort of different iterations of this concept of movement and steps? And I know that's very amorphous. So if you just want to sit here and have a chat and I can write things on the Padlet, that's also okay. But I'd like us to spend the sort of next, 3 to 5 minutes. So having a think about this and then returning and discussing it. Is that okay with everyone? Okay, if you'd like, very good. So if you'd like to use the Padlet, please do. I'm going to stop screen sharing because then I can see you better. It's so selfishly of me. And then we'll return to this. But what I'll do is I'll put the groupings. The groupings are already on the Padlet, so you can just return to that, or you can always ask. And I'll join you on the Padlet momentarily.
I think I've been trying to start a podcast, and I have not. But I kind of realized that where the steps that I need to take are, number one, to find someone who has a podcast and talk to them, and find out how it's done, what I need, the equipment, the space, and that kind of thing. And then with a group, I need to find people because I'm a people person. As you know, I love dancing and I love music. So I always like the community that supports that. So I would have to talk to someone or some people that I can interview or talk to at the beginning of my podcast, at least to make all the mistakes for as the pioneer or as the pioneer sessions. And then find a way of including my other facilitators, because I do a lot of facilitation as a community or as and then see if I can take it bigger. So I'm thinking, I don't know if I'm answering the question, but I like talking, so.
So do I. Some of us are verbal processors, aren't we?
Yeah. So
yeah.
So I'm thinking that as much as I've not started, I know the steps that I need to get there. But for the reason why I have not yet started, I think it's that I've not actualized my steps, because they need to be actualized in my brain in the way I think in, because I also fear failure. So I need to actualize that so that
yes,
it can work. So I'm just throwing this there. I don't know where it's going to go, but yeah.
I think so. As you started speaking, I was writing, find others working on the same thing you are. So we were clearly both leaning towards the like, I don't want to do this by myself concept. And I think one thing is that's very interesting is thinking about your wish to have your steps sort of actualized and I think maybe clear to you is, although that might, one thing I think is interesting about the elegant step is it just focus on the next one. So it's like, what can this group do? What do we know? What don't we know? And I think that might help, because so much tension when you're trying to do especially big work comes from the difference between your plan and reality. And one thing I think that happens with this idea of an elegant step is you're existing in the reality all the time. So you're not existing in a hypothetical plan world where you're definitely not going to have anything go wrong and you find everyone that you need to find. You're kind of taking each step as it comes. And I think it is trickier for some of us to work that way. I like having I like having a timeline. And that's just how I manage procrastination. But this idea that each step is unique. So it's not so much this step, so because this is next on my list, it's like this step and what does that mean? And then the next step and what does that mean? And I like that reflective point that this concept comes in. So it might be you're thinking, oh, I need to find someone who's doing podcasts, but what aspect? Is it the content? Is it the technical? Is it the how do you get over the sound of your own voice, which would be my problem? That kind of thing that you're looking for sort of support information on. And then maybe the difference between asking for information and working with someone. And which of that is your first most elegant step? Is it just getting some info to find the work? It'd be really interesting. We've also got learning the vocabulary and discussing terms and ideas. So making sure everything's clear for anyone who does. So in the UK, it's called EDI, so Equity, Diversity and Inclusion. I know it goes by JEDI, and also there's all sorts of acronyms in this area. But one thing that I think is a very positive effect of that work becoming much broader is people realizing how important it is to establish common language. So there's a lot of work, at least in the UK, around glossaries and things and discussing language. Yes, Tanya?
One thing that I found problematic, though, is I found that it increasingly it's so difficult. Like, I'm the one who put that note up, and I'm presenting a counter argument to it, because I find that with some people it's very difficult to use words to get a concept across. One example is explaining to someone the difference between dismiss and disagree. So Jenny, you might say something to me and I'll be like, and my automatic reaction is to wave it away. That's dismissal, versus you saying something, me thinking about it and having a reason to disagree with it. And then we can still move forward. Like, I can explain to you, oh, Jenny, I don't see it that way, and this is why. and then we can move forward. And I find that with some people, it's impossible to do that. And I've observed a lot of other people having that challenge too. So I think that obtaining agreement on the meaning of terms is very good, but it's insufficient. So it's one elegant step, I suppose, but it needs to be accompanied by something else. And I think maybe one of the alternative options is, it seems that showing people examples of things happening, like using a clip from a TV show or using a video, I don't know, to demonstrate through actions, that might help. But yeah, I find this one thing is it works well, I think, with people like us, because I think we already understand each other. I think we have a lot of the same values. And I think we have a lot of similar approaches to what we want to do. But when you have people who, even if they have the same values, they don't understand how to communicate, it's so difficult to get across to them. And then the conflict arises just because the confusion in the process of trying to get people to understand. And it's not even pushing someone's values on someone or ideas on someone. It's just, sometimes it feels impossible to attain a similar understanding of a term that can have a very objective and clear definition.
I think too, Virginia, I was about to call you in. So yes, go ahead.
No, it's just that, so I teach communication, I teach group communication. And one of the things that comes up all the time is, first of all, it's not that the person is not communicating, it's you have two people within a communication cycle. So you have one person who's listening, but they've got their filters up, and someone else who's communicating, who's trying to get this message across, but they've got their filters up also. So that's why I had actually written this in the padlock. What I have found, and that we work on a lot, is you need to first establish how you are going to work together as a group. And what I find a lot of times is that any group that I've worked with, because I've worked with groups in business, I've worked with groups in education, there's always pushback in, well, we don't want to waste our time doing this. But the fact is, if you begin by first coming up with ways, how are you going to communicate? Some people, as you said, Danielle, some people are not good verbal communicators, but they're excellent if you use graphs or visuals or metaphors. That's just the way that they think. Other groups, and it's always amazing to me when I do this. So I have a questionnaire actually that I use, and I have my students go through, and it's their various parts of the group and what their thoughts are and beliefs are on group work. And then, so they fill that out before they come in as individuals. Then in class, they're put into groups and they create a common worksheet on how they're going to work based on that. So what they do is they just go ahead and they, those values they discuss. And what they find is that by using those, we take a whole class out to do that. By using that and planning how they're going to be working, it's not necessarily that the group works, that their end product is better, but that they actually are more satisfied and they can learn from each other better by having, you know, it's that learning process that they really learn from each other by setting those ground rules first. And I did put that in the padlock, you know, setting those ground first is really, really, really important, and to allow groups that time. And I think it's true also with the institutional. What tends to happen with institutional is they begin with, this is what we want to do, and we want you to agree with us, rather than starting off at the bottom and creating something that everyone can sort of agree with. Ultimately, it's the people at the top who make the decision, but you need to bring in order to get consensus and I'm thinking of the word, buy-in from those within the institution. You have to listen to what they're saying and include some of those things in order to really change an institution.
So it sounds like, I think this is probably implicit in Adrienne Marie Brown's definition, but we would like it to be a bit more clear when we're thinking about it, that part of this ability to take an elegant step is leaving no one behind. Like if you're working with a group or you're working collectively towards a goal, part of it, she says an awareness of what this group can do and what the knowns and unknowns are. And she wouldn't want like the world's longest definition. I appreciate her need to be pithy, so I could highlight it in my Kindle. But I think for us, it's sounding like a lot of this is also about that hearts and minds work so that you can continue working together. So an elegant step is one as well that doesn't leave anyone who's not decided to exit the group on their own or needs to exit the group for some reason, is leaving no one behind, that you can all take it, if not, simultaneously, certainly you're all still on the journey together. And a lot of what we were flagging here and sort of adding in our nuance was this concept that it's not okay to do one thing if it leaves a group, isolated, if it doesn't communicate the needs and wants of that cohort. And I think that's a really interesting position, interesting in an extremely positive way, because so much of, at least higher education, especially in the UK, is posited on individual excellence, in a race to, get what you need to get out of everything. And this idea that maybe one of your core responsibilities is not to take a step forward without everyone else working with you could transform the way, as you were saying, Virginia, it would bring people along, wouldn't it, in a way that's perhaps not the same.
But I think also the thing that's really, really important is to recognize that who is in the group and what are they bringing to the group, and be able to I think a lot of times with groups, people withdraw either physically or just mentally because they feel that what they have, the group does not, it's not valuable to the group. So why share with the group if what you have is not something that you go in with the mindset that I have something to share, but no one else does. So you're not listening to the person. I guess that's what I'm trying to say. So giving, I can't think of the word, not really the recognition, but valuing that each person has something that they can contribute.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like we're making our own running definitions. I'm about to hit yes on a pedal and you'll see it go up. It sounds like we're making our own sort of running definition for this. It's a step that leaves no one working on the goal behind. It recognizes the contribution of each person, whether that's expertise or a strength of theirs, or, I mean, sometimes it's just not just in a minimizing way, but it's their presence, and then what we can do is we can keep adding to this running definition, because it'd be really lovely if what came out of this session was our own framework for elegant steps. Not least because I'm working on an emergent framework for belonging that I will promptly nick this from, and then obviously cite all three of you as co-developers of this thing. So no, that's really beautiful. So we've got recognizing each person, bringing everyone with us. Institutional is an interesting one. Is anyone here working or within, it sounds like Virginia is within an institution where it feels like there are things they could do that they're not doing, or there is a better way?
So actually what happened was we had our previous, we had brought in a president of our university who was very inclusive and wanted to develop the institution from the bottom up. And so he was there for about 3 years and was making really great progress at creating a more of an inclusive community, and he died of a heart attack. And so they brought the next person that they brought in, who was interim. She actually came from the education department. So she continued on with this. And we had a really interesting, we were in the process of creating our mission statement for the university. And what they did was they had interdepartmental groups working on missions, and they had like 10 different areas. And then they brought in workshops once they came up with what their ideas were. And they included in that things like presenting it through artistic ways, scientific ways. It was very, very creative, so that they could get everyone's input into it. And then we came up with a list of mission statements, because we were in the process of getting a new president. And we thought, if we have this to give to the president, whoever we choose, and that was part of the process, was that we said, well, we're working on this and we're really engaged in this. So he became the president. Our new president came in. He looked at it and he changed it, and then he presented it to various departments, went around to all the departments and said, this is what it is. He changed it so much from what the original intent was. And then in these meetings, what he would say is, we're only going to present this. We'll have question and answer later, or you can give feedback online. Well, they totally ignored all of the feedback that we gave. And then they presented the mission statement and said, well, you designed it. When we really hadn't. It was like he had totally changed what we had really designed, because we had something before he was even hired. And there was it's just been a really tumultuous 5 years working with him, because it was so contrary to what the intent had originally been. And he changed it by going from a top down. You will accept this. This is what we have decided. And a lot of people, myself included, have retired early, because it was just a totally different. And then the pandemic hit, in the middle of all of this. And then they said, well, we have to go with this now. So I think that's where I'm coming from in terms of the institutional. You can have a top down, or you can have a bottom up. But if you have a bottom up, you have to have people at the top that accept that. So and basically what we felt was the institution was not listening to us. You can,
yeah. So it's not just bringing people along, it's demonstrating that you heard them.
Right.
And I think that probably has a lot to do with the actions that you take after the conversation, that this is an action you take, this step. So this is where you, prove that you are trying to work together towards a common goal. And perhaps one of the things to keep in mind when thinking about our elegant steps is that how quickly you can derail something, by not demonstrating that listening and that care with the effort people had already put in as well. I think there's something there inside what you're saying, Virginia, about all the work you guys had done, that you all had done, that wasn't being valued as the person went around just changing things and then saying, no, actually what you thought was true wasn't true. This is now true, which, as we all know, is not fantastic. Before we move on in any way, is there anything anyone wanted to add? We've all stepped away from society, which does feel like a terrifying thing. I threw that in there on a whim. One thing I think is really important to think about is how this kind of work can dovetail with collective, communal work, and how a lot of around this perspective, I'm sure we're already all working that way, but can really mesh disparate groups together. So even if you're working as separate groups, if you've done the work or working towards a similar goal, I think a lot of this around, not leaving anyone behind, demonstrating your listening and your actions, all of that can be really powerful in changing institutions and societies. Because when I do the training with several groups, I always say an institution will hopefully empathize with an individual. They'll try and help them if they're in distress or struggling or anything like that, you would hope. It will only really change because of a cohort or a trend. So it's very difficult for an individual to, unless you are at the very, very top and you're quite hierarchical, to make significant changes. Institutions are massive corporate, bodies. They travel in a direction with a lot of, it takes a lot of sort of pushing to shift that. But the more you can demonstrate, thinking about elegant steps, the more you can demonstrate that you're working with a group or it affects a group or anything like that, I think the more leverage you have. So even when you're thinking about this, if you go back, when we do the consultative bit, we can talk about, right, so if we do keep moving together and more people join us, like what further levers does that give? If Irene starts the world's most popular podcast, what kind of changes can she make? Or joins a consortia of podcasters, all speaking on similar topics, who can then demand, if you want any of us to go there. I mean, it's unionizing, but as opposed to being attached to your job, it can just be attached to your whatever you're working on at the time. So I think that's also worth thinking about, and is probably linked for Adrienne Marie Brown to obviously all the work she does in communities. But before we move on, is there anyone who want to add anything else? No? And Virginia, I think you're typing, so don't worry, it won't go away or anything. I'll go back to Gamma. There we are. And share again. So we were just, oh, sorry, Irene.
Sorry, what happens if what I think is my most elegant step is not? What did you call that when it's not so elegant? Or how would I know that my step is not so elegant?
So I think it would depend. So this is just me saying things, so please disagree. I think for me, it would depend on, so if you defined it the way we were, which is that it's bringing people with you and it demonstrates your listening, I think at some point you start seeing tension between where you're going and perhaps where you can get, or where you're going and where people actually are comfortable. That you see a lot, I would think, especially if you're someone pushing boundaries. So if you're where you're heading, people are getting steadily less willing to walk with you. I think it may be, and you need to think about this, what I do for people in teaching, like you need to go back to what your actual goal is. And if your goal is to change something, there will probably be a level of discomfort, won't there? You might need to do more work in the bringing with. If your goal is more around building a network or a cohesive collective community, it might be that you slow down or stop stepping in that direction. We really are leading into this metaphor for a little while. But I think so much of that, or so much of the value in this metaphor particularly, you won't get hopefully too far away before you notice. If you're thinking about it step by step, and then you're checking in with your community and your actions and everything, I think what you find, or hopefully you'll find, is that it's harder to get off course, instead of rocketing ahead. As some of us are wont to do, you can see it, right? Or you can taste it, like it's almost there, it's right there, if only. I think those of us who are rocket aheaders, and I am definitely one of those, this kind of thing can be really helpful, because it's probably unhelpful to be the only one there. When you get there, probably your goals were to be not by yourself. So I think you'll start feeling the tension in the group. And that's where it was Danielle who said, making sure, I think it was like making sure everyone can talk to, you don't spend so much time trying to do a common vocabulary that you forget that you actually need to be, communicating. So I think that's also really important too. But yeah, I do think, you'll probably notice. Luckily, the next question I had is how we might need to constrain ourselves to make our steps elegant. So this is another thing we can either add to the Padlet, or I was just going to have everyone do it in the chat. And this is also where Gamma kind of falls down, because it went just blank slide with text. This idea is that there's constraints or context that are needed to allow your step to reflect your understanding of the problem or opportunity, the capacity of the group or individual to work on it, and what's still unknown. So like what do you have to do to make it a step and not a leap? So what modifications might we suggest? So looking at our Padlet, we have things like, the vocabulary. So we've already talked about that. So the modifications we would suggest there are acknowledging it's not about definitions, it's about communication. But thinking about some of the other things we've been discussing, what are the constraints in using this as a framework? And constraints aren't always bad. Sometimes they help us. For me, one of them is an example is, again, it's the not rocketing ahead. So I can get very focused on a goal, especially if the goal is helpful for a group and I want to fix whatever the thing is. And I can often see a potential fix. So this kind of framing helps me because it asks me what I should do next to make sure I recognize what the group wants, not just what I see. So a constraint there is always having to sort of check with others or with a community to ensure that you're moving en masse, as opposed to, again, just one person being like, I can fix it and shooting off in some random direction. So we've got, Irene wants to get over her limiting beliefs, and Danielle says brevity helps. Yes, again, something I struggle with. Does anyone have any, I'm looking at Virginia, the communications maven, thinking about brevity. So what would that look like for thinking about elegant steps? So things we would do next. What do we mean around brevity? So Daniel, feel free to add more to the chat. Virginia says, be flexible in what the outcomes might look like as long as it moves forward. Daniel.
With brevity, I find the way that helps is that sometimes when you are able, it's not always possible, but when you're able to present an idea as a small chunk, it can be useful, because if you elaborate too much, then the other ideas become the focus. Like, haven't we all had a discussion with someone who will ignore the main message of your main message because they're addressing a technicality and it derails everything? Or there'll be someone who will say, well, not all people of this group are that way, so that derails things. So it's with brevity, if you keep your message brief, there's less opportunity for people to take the wrong element and carry on with it on a tangent that derails your whole project.
No, absolutely. I'm just adding to our running definition. So it keeps the message focused on on moving forward, doesn't it? As opposed to hypothesizing further down the line. Or it keeps the message focused on the next step. And I guess that's another thing to think about if you're thinking about an elegant step and this framing, is that by keeping your focus on what's actually next for us as a group, as long as you've agreed to whatever your larger outcome is without getting into the technical details, I think you sidestep a lot of that, not disingenuous, but quite, there can be barriers to movement, those sort of circular conversations around, well, what if this, that, and the other? And you're like, well, we've not got there yet, and it's not been a problem so far. And then Virginia's wants us to be flexible and move from complex to simple. Is that something the group can do together? So in the work of thinking of the next step, is part of it?
Yeah, often just through the discussion, my thing is always, you have these discussions. It's important, I think, whoever is facilitating the discussions, to be able to pull out what the group is learning from each other by having those discussions, so that they don't feel that it is something that is really a waste of time. But at the same time, Danielle, as you said, those people who are sidetracking the real issue, a good facilitator will then say, okay, so let's table that for now. We understand. So we're going to put that on the side. We're going to, and what I found really works is to say, okay, we're going to actually list, these are some of the concerns that we have. Let's focus on what we're talking about now. And then we can, if we have time, we can come back to those issues because they are still important. But, and we know now that we need to consider this aspect as we're talking about it, but let's move on now and sort of put it, if you're going to use that metaphor, put it on the, what do they call them? The platform, you know, if you have a staircase and then you turn and you go up the stairs, that little area.
The landing.
The landing, yes.
Yeah. I've not said that word in years.
The landing so that we can continue on, but we'll come back to it, you know, but at this point, this is over to the side. So even just by writing it out for them to know, okay, noted. Now let's move on.
Sorry, I lost my little like, where's the mute button gone? No, absolutely. So some of this then, so I think when I first put this together, I was thinking very concretely, going back to Irene's, like, I want to actualize all my steps. I was thinking very concretely about the steps, but a lot of what we're talking about around this is about the management of the group in order to enable them to make concrete decisions to then take a step. So I think one of the modifications is around, so if we're thinking about making sure it's elegant, so it brings everyone with us and things like that, one of the modifications would be around like those in charge knowing that's their job. Because I'm sure we've all been there or been in charge of things where it all goes slightly pear-shaped. And I do wonder if some of it's that lack of recognition that that's part of the ask. You know, is keeping things on track and moving in a way that feels like it brings everyone with them or does bring everyone with them and also listens without allowing it to be derailed. And thinking back to Virginia's code of sort of conduct that her students made as groups, you know, thinking very carefully about that role. Because there is a temptation, especially I think with a group like this, where we all feel, you know, quite confident that we're having a chat that no one person may necessarily be in charge, you know, and then so how does that, the role doesn't have to be inhabited by a person. You just need to be aware that this is work that needs to be done. So facilitator rather than leader, absolutely, Virginia. Right, so what I would like to do now, if everyone's happy, so we've talked about some of the constraints and thinking about, you know, not allowing it to be derailed. For me, it's very much about focusing on the now and not like this amazing future that we're so close if we could only just kind of thing, and moving us all together. I think as well, ta-da, where what I'd like us to do now is just take some time. Have you guys, you're my first people, so probably, but have you heard of what's called Troika Consulting before? Yes, one yes and one no. Two yeses and one, and Virginia's not sure, so lucky you, Virginia. We're also going to incorporate something called the 15% solution. Ooh, more puzzling. So that's like my ultimate favorite thing, and I'm very excited to get to explain it. So for Virginia, and then anyone else, please chip in. I use a flying geese. I use a modified version of this, partially because I can't stand the concept of consultation, like as a business thing. But I also have yet to run into anyone who's come up with a better set of vocabulary for me to use. Speaking of words, so I talk about sharing contexts. And what I would like us to do is we have time as a group. We've got just over an hour. So I'm going to give us a break first because 2 hours is a long time to be sitting down. I was going to give us a break first. And then when we came back, if someone would like to volunteer, I think it's really helpful to take something like this and try and apply it. And so I would like us to think about sharing a context that we're working in, either with a specific ask in mind, so a thing we're trying to accomplish, or perhaps with like a more general goal you have, Irene's podcasting aspiration, something like that, that you'd like to sort of talk through. And we're going to first listen to you. So the idea around Troika Consulting has to do with the the way the person presenting the context or needing consulting on the topic gets the time and space to themselves, Virginia, and that we only ask questions for clarification or additional information to ensure we understand what's going on. And then we spend some time discussing what we think about it and what might happen. And I like using, when talking about elegant solutions, I like framing it using the 15% solution exercise, which is another liberatory practice. So if you've looked up Troika Consulting on that web pages, you can find this one too. It will be in the Slack if you haven't looked at it before. But this idea is just, what can you do with what you've got? Like, what can you do with what you've got? Whatever it is, whoever you are, what can you do with what you've got? And I find this can really, really free up some conversations and also help keep them from being derailed. We've all run into some people who spend a lot of time telling you they know how to fix your thing, but it's really that they know how they'd fix your thing. So not how you could do it, but how they would do it if they were in your position, still being the same person they were, and the advice they're giving you is very imbued with their own position and privilege and life experiences. And the 15% solution exercise I find useful for helping people who tend to come from that perspective and others really focus on the resource, capacity, and expertise present in the person or group that's working on the issue. It helps limit the mansplaining or privilege splaining, which is often what it's rooted in, that of any particular area. And also going back to thinking about not leaving anyone behind, it helps limit the leaping too far ahead, because you're just acting on what you have now and what you can do. But first, what I want to do is give everyone about 10 minutes break. So let's do 8 minutes. So at 2:05, we can reconvene. Just please stretch your legs, have a drink of water, do whatever you need to do. Don't, if you can avoid it, don't check your emails or anything like that. Take some time to yourself. And I'll see you at 2:05, and we'll get started on the consultation if anyone wants to volunteer. Through thinking about specifically around this idea of elegant steps. So it might be, what do you do next, or is what I'm doing making sense? And what we're going to do is we'd give you about 3 minutes to talk us through what's happening and how it's going. We could ask you questions. Then the group that hasn't been presenting is going to have a quick discussion with you there. You don't have to like weirdly leave Zoom or anything, around what we heard and some potential sort of 15% solutions. So things that you could do with the resource you have in the context you are. And then we'll come back together and think about whether that sounds like an elegant step or which one would be the next most elegant step. So anyone who had something in their back pocket, if not, I did bring others. I just realized I don't have the chat up. Yes, go ahead.
I could tell you about my podcast, although I have something else that I told you I talk. So I have something else that I can also talk about. So I started something called the Heart of Kenyan Facilitation. I realized that people keep on confusing training and facilitation, and although sometimes the line is very thin, and so I started that specifically for Kenyan and East African facilitators that are either wanting to be, trying to be, or already facilitators, and also the members of the International Association of Facilitators that could join. And so I promised myself that I would have a topic to facilitate every month. But also I wanted other people to offer to facilitate, also to say, there's something that I found that is very interesting. There's a book I'm writing, there's a book I read, there's something that I think we can share as facilitators to improve on our facilitation skills and methods, and just have a laugh like what we are having now, you know. And so I started that, but my challenge at the I still do it. The only month that I didn't do is last month because I think you always have fatigue at one point and you can't think and something happens. And but my challenge that I have at the moment is I know the things that I can bring there that are very beneficial, but it's always very challenging for me to find people to tell, even when they join the sessions, when I ask them, what else would you like to learn? And people just don't say anything, or they say, oh, whatever you bring. But also remember our settings as Africans, we are taught to be polite, even when things don't go right. So that's also something that I have. And so I never get the feedback that what else can we bring or someone else to present. When they do, I'm the one who follows them to do that. I don't get paid for these sessions, but I would want to get paid at one point. So even if it's just like $1 per session or something. So my challenge is I need other people, even if it's not from Africa or from my community of my settings, other people. How do I involve other people to be able to come and be part of the Heart of Kenyan facilitation without feeling like it's a Kenyan thing just because there's a Kenya in front of the Heart of facilitation, right? And then then what? I've been wondering, then what? Then, so I don't miss topics, as you know, because of joining everybody and joining my fest and being part of the intentionally equitable hospitality team. We always have something that we discuss, or someone presents that gives me an idea of a topic. So topics are not the problem, but my issue is I need people to come up with, we need this is my immediate need. So can you find someone, or can you be able to facilitate this? Yeah, so, and I'm sure you'll ask other questions. So I stop there. Thank you for listening.
Yeah, go ahead, Virginia.
I have just some clarification, if I'm hearing you right here. So I'm not sure I understand if what the problem is that you need to identify people from outside of Kenya who are facilitators so that your group can learn better the difference between facilitation and training, or is it that you want your group to have more experience in interacting with people outside of Kenya, or so that they can see what the difference is in other cultures? Or and then the other question that I had was, how within Kenya, how do they normally get feedback? I mean, I'm assuming that even when you're being polite, there's a certain way in which you're given feedback, so that outside of Kenya, people may not recognize it, but within your culture, you recognize they're giving you feedback.
One, the sessions are more for improving our facilitation skills and methodologies. So, and to bring in people who are in training to understand the difference. So it's a kind of a two-sided, they are two-sided session, so to speak, or sessions. I would like to be able to approach Virginia, Danielle, or even Jennie to come in and tell me, I think I can present in your sessions. Can I do that with you, or can you let me know how to be part of that? But I think because I don't know if I should go to people and ask them if they can present, but then, yeah. And then the other thing is that the reason why I want other people to join is because then it's involving the society, as we were talking about, it's involving the community. So because facilitation is not mine, it's not for Kenya, it's everywhere. And we have to do things that if I facilitate something in Kenya, it's the same quality and the same high standards as I would do if I go to Europe or if I go to the Americas. So that is what I want to bring to the table with the Heart of Kenyan Facilitation, where they understand that even someone coming from a different continent, these are the standards that they have, and these are the standards that we need to keep. And the networking of it is also another big thing, because I don't know if you are religious, but I always believe that God makes us meet for a certain reason. Even if it's just one day, there's always a reason. So that's why I like putting people together for that networking. So I don't know if I answered all the questions, Virginia.
Is it something that you're working on? So what's your community for this? So if, for example, if you turn to those who'd attended your sessions and said, what should, because you said, what did I write down? You're thinking about then what? So if you turn to those who'd attended and said, I'm trying to think about then what for us, what does then what look like? We talked before, didn't we, about an elegant step, people need to be ready to move with you. Would they be ready to move with you, or are you still sort of forming the community and therefore you want to pull, more in?
Yeah, I want more people to see the benefit of it, because at the moment it always feels like I have more time, so I can prepare the sessions and I can let them know when the sessions happen and they'll show up. Well, of course, not many show up, but when they do show up, even if it's just 3 people or 4 people, they do show up. But it's always like, you prepare whatever you're preparing and let us have that. Virginia, you are asking also about feedback in the way they do it. So there's written feedback and there's verbal feedback. The verbal one is usually, the spoken one is usually like, you're doing a great job, this is wonderful, this is okay. So when they go to writing, then a few of them will say, keep what you're doing, involve other people, but they don't say, can you involve me, see? Yeah, so, yeah. Yeah, and yes, it's like training of the trainer. Yeah, a taught for facilitation skills. Yeah, kinda, but it's usually not straightforward. It's always like the session is about, say, the use of music in facilitation. Then in the process, I'll use music and I'll also use some other methods from the liberating structures or from somewhere else that I've picked up from. And then I combine the two, so you are benefiting on methodologies and also on how to facilitate using music. So that's how I do the sessions. Yeah.
So, but the people that you're actually training, who are they?
It's not training per se. It's an offer of sessions that I give that are kind of training. But it's facilitators from Africa. I started from Kenya, then now I told the East African ones, the facilitators from East Africa can join, and also now from Africa, whoever wants to join the sessions can join from Africa.
But then what do they do with that afterwards? I mean,
they are facilitators. They also do facilitation. That's what their work is. Or they train, or they are trainers, yes.
Okay, so that's why I use the term training the trainer, because that's what we say when you're trying to teach people who train or who facilitate these new skills. Yeah. So in other words, you want them then to go back to their job with whatever group they're with and use those skills. Do you want them to use those skills though, so that those who are receiving training from them will also begin to use those skills?
Yes.
Okay. So that's the ultimate goal.
Yes. Okay. The ultimate goal is that we keep the ripple of we keep it flowing. One, to improve their skills. Number two, probably to even get more jobs of better consultations or better, assignments, and then of course to carry forward the I call it the gospel facilitation. So that's really the idea, but also to create a need, a curiosity for finding out about the new the new tools that are coming out, especially in online facilitation, the new methods that are coming out, especially the liberating structures or other methods that are out there. I want to create that curiosity so that people don't wait until I present Troika and then they are like, oh, that's nice, where did you get it? But it's there. They, that curiosity is not there. I want to create that curiosity.
If Danielle doesn't have a question, I was wondering, what do you think if you went to your group or you went to those who'd attended more than one or something and said, what are we working on together? Because some of this discussion we had on the Elegant Step was that it's about sort of a community goal, and you have a lot of goals for what you're doing. And I do that too, where you're like, also it will do this, and that's often very helpful for getting funding. But I think one of the things with an Elegant Step might be that, what's your community goal? So is there a community practice forming around this a little bit, like a group, or does it seem very centered? Their goal maybe is attending the trainings and getting better, and they haven't yet engaged with the wider sort of thing. If you asked your participants why they were there, what do you think they would say?
They were coming to learn something new, I think. That's what they would say. And others would say that they didn't want to disappoint me because they are probably are more than an acquaintance to them. So they just wanted to, make sure that I'm not alone in my sessions. To be honest, I have a group called the Coast Facilitators Network, but we use the Swahili word, which is Pwani, the Pwani Facilitators Network, and we started it because of that. But they actually hardly join the sessions, but they are the ones who mostly need it, because I've been with them, I've seen how they do their work and stuff like that. So, the way you give feedback, but they usually hardly join the training sessions, but they come for the meetings that we meet as a network, but they hardly join the session. So I don't know where or is it, or anyway, yeah. Let me stop overthinking it now.
No, it's hard once people start asking things.
So I have another question. So you mentioned that you have some people that come back over and over again.
Yes.
And then you have the people that come only once.
Yes.
Do you know what the goal is for the people that come back over and over again? Why? Do you know why they come back over and over again?
I do know that two of them say that they use the methods that what we discuss or they either adapt them or adopt them for the assignment that they have that week or the following assignment that they have. And it works so well that they come back to get a new method so that they can use it again. Those are the people that are frequent, and there are about 3 of them that are very frequent to my sessions. The ones who, the others always say, oh, I didn't have the time, or the time coincides with, with something else that I'm doing. So, and since it's a free thing that I'm offering, that I decided to do from my heart, then I have to keep on going. And probably I'm panicking too early. I don't know.
And Danielle, you have a question. Go ahead.
Irene, what are a couple of challenges that you've had in recruiting people to work alongside you as facilitators in this project?
Someone says that they are going to join me for a session, and we even put their names in the poster because I create some posters that are put in several spaces. And on either the day before, they say that they are not available, something else came up. Or when we are trying to put together the slides, someone will say, no, put together the slides and I come and see it's okay, you know. So it's not, we don't co-create it together. You see, so they want their name to appear in the poster that they'll be facilitating with me, but they are not willing to make time to co-create the slides with me, even if they're just, because I use very few slides. They are not willing to co-create or even come and sit and go through what I've already created. So we get to the session for those who join me, and they are lost if you tell them, so continue this part, because that's the part that suits them, or the part that they had said they would take over, then they get lost because they, you know, they don't know how to do that because we didn't go through it, or they didn't have time for us to go through it. So I end up doing most of the work or the facilitation. So that's one of the challenges that I've had.
Jenny, is it too early to propose solutions?
Well, I was going to ask Irene, we're going to move into the bit where we talk and you listen to us. Would you like us to focus on anything in particular? This is my modification on Troika, because sometimes I've watched people who were consulted be like, as the conversation veers. Yeah.
I would like everybody to just pick up something that they felt that is a mess for me, so that I can get that help that is individualized from each one of you. Yeah, I would appreciate that.
Very good. So taking on from Irene's statement that, sorry, I take notes in something called Obsidian, so it's on a different screen, that she's asking herself, then what? I think what we can do is spend the next sort of 7 minutes discussing then what within the framing of sort of elegant steps, and then Irene's asked us to sort of help tidy up and whatever we were hearing. Does anyone want to go first? Anyway, it sounded like you had something. Would you like to kick us off?
Okay. I'm going to use the word contract, but I don't mean something that formal. But I think it might be worth preparing some form of contract or message to say, oh, okay, you want to work with me and we're going to facilitate this. Okay, this is how I work. And this is what I have found to be successful for these sessions for the facilitators and the participants. And what I would put in that paragraph or contract is, something to the effect that, okay, we need to meet 2 or 3 times in preparation for the session. And you explain to them how you want the collaboration to work, and not how you want it to work, but how, because then it sounds like it's selfish, but rather how it is effective, how you have found it to be effective. And so when the person agrees to meet for 2 or 3 sessions, and they actually do, even if they cancel at the last minute, you both have shared your ideas, you have enough of an understanding of what they want to do. So if you're stuck alone, you can still deliver the ideas. And the other thing is that person who wanted you to do all the prep work and only show up at the last minute just to present, well, no, they can't do that, because you've explained in the prep that paragraph that no, this is how we need to work together. Because I kind of understand someone coming from that perspective, because they don't understand collaboration. And if you explain it to them and work with them through the collaborative process, by the end of the process, they might better understand. And you might have to go through 2 or 3 sessions with that person before sessions, meaning different training modules. So you have one session that has 3 or 4 prep, and then the actual training, and then go through another cycle and go through another cycle. Maybe by the 2nd or 3rd, they finally get it. Oh, this is collaboration. Then they might never come again saying, oh, this is too much work. Or yeah, and for some people it's, oh, I value my time, I don't have time to collaborate with you for 2 or 3 sessions. And then you can say, okay, well, thank you, but I'll move on with someone else. Because with that expectation set at the beginning, then it's easier to kind of filter out or filter in the people that whose habits are compatible with your process.
I wonder too if Irene couldn't link it with the learning about facilitation. So a lot of people are taking facilitation to mean what you deliver on the day. But we all know that's not all of it. You know, you've done a lot of planning, you have a lot of expertise, you've practiced. And I think one of the things that I always find so helpful with students is like we're confusing output with learning. Output isn't the same as learning. Output is often how we demonstrate our learning. So in fact, if you want to, you know, if you want to really push them, sometimes you'd be like, actually, what I would do is have you deliver the, you know, to show your learning, it would be you delivering the session. But for you to learn really the nuts and bolts of facilitation, it's this whole process. So it's not just, I think people think of them like teaching tricks, and they don't. What happens when you do that is there's not a pedagogical value, you know. And then I think sometimes people don't develop the instincts of when it's most appropriate to use a specific thing, because, and that's where you get mismatches when you attend a session that's being facilitated and you're like, this icebreaker is making me uncomfortable. Like, because they didn't think about it in the context of the topic or the people. They did it once and it was kind of fun. And so I think one of the things I wonder if it's really helpful would be to assert that part of the learning opportunity for those joining in is to work with you on a session. So even if there's nothing that they want right now, if you're providing everything, for those who want to enhance or extend their understanding, you know, they can join in with you and you can collaborate on a session, with the goal being that then they become, you know, the little hub is your network and the spokes are everyone out there, you know, delivering, like you said, to the standard that you would like to establish. And I think that can be really helpful. It's interesting how revelatory the concept of preparation as learning can be for people, and also for those who are anxious, how freeing it can be to like, no, I work at this. I did not come here. I did not appear fully formed as a facilitator. Like, I work at this. So I'm wondering if we're thinking about elegant steps and 15% solutions, you could just offer this out as part of the training, is to, you know, what an opportunity, Irene, to work with you, putting something together. And you can only let, if, you know, because of capacity, but then as more people do it, they can work with others. And then this is where I get ahead of myself and lose people, so I'll stop. But yeah, that kind of thing. I was thinking when Danielle was talking. For you, Virginia, is there anything?
Yes, I had sort of thought of that myself, was have the people who are your students at this point identify those areas where they're weakest or where that they would like to know more of, and offer them then the option to facilitate, and you will help them in doing that, but that also helps them to learn in the future, if there are topics that they're interested in, how do they go about learning about facilitation? So what you're really doing is, and so you use those 3 people to start off with, who are, and you get them to identify those issues, those areas that they want. And that may also help. I mean, you're coming up with the topics now, and you said you're sort of like, okay, I'm getting sort of burned out because you run out of topics. But by using them, now it might be more relevant also to other people, because if they're having those issues, then maybe other people are also, and they may come back because it was something that they tried and then it didn't work. So it's a way to get people to repeat, and you reach out to those people who have gone to past trainings and say, now so-and-so who has been following through, they're going to present on this that they've identified as being a problem. So we're going to work through this, and maybe those people will come back, that you'll be able to get a larger following too. My other thought was, I'm not sure who these people are that you've reached out for, but if you may want to reach out to other nonprofit organizations that may want training. So not just individuals, but also go in, maybe make some connections. And one of the ways, the best way to do this is you go to the nonprofit and you say, you know, I offer these free training. And I'd like to know, what are some common problems that you have when you're doing training? I'm just trying to come up with some relevant issues that I can then research. And then when you've done that, go back to those nonprofits and say, well, I don't know if any of your people would be interested in this, but this was something that you pointed out was a need. And now I'm going to do this session on it. So that's also a way to bring in more people and more institutions, and maybe make a greater impact, because now you're not just working with the trainers, you're also working with people who that it will help their training in general, those organizations.
I have 2 more points if we have time. Okay, I'll try to be brief. Okay, so 1 point builds on the first thing that Virginia was saying, and it's what my point is, to establish a brave space, unless it's already there. Like, if you have enough of a community and they understand that when you're in one of those of Irene's sessions, that we're all here to learn. But if that culture of learning is not yet there, I would establish it, or possibly reestablish it at every session, to say that whether you are a participant or whether you are a co-facilitator with Irene, we are all here to learn. And it could be the co-facilitator is learning facilitation techniques. It could be the participants, or I imagine the participants are always there to learn something. And so it's also the participants are there to learn something. And to say that, it might be worth saying that there may be things that either you, facilitator, or participants don't like or don't understand in the session. And the thing is, there will always be something you don't like. And the perspective to take on it is how to turn that into a learning opportunity. So if you as a participant don't like something, okay, stop and think, take note of what that is, and think, how can I learn from this? And, because we can't please everyone. So it's important to have, to just respect that, yeah, there's things you don't like, and we're here to learn anyways, and those things that you don't like are still going to stay. But it's not to offend anyone, it's just that you just can't please everyone. And the other point I wanted to make is culture clash. So you've talked, Irene, about maybe, bringing in people from outside of Kenya to facilitate with you. Having worked in Kenya, I know that there can be a culture clash, and that we're not even aware of it. We think that we're working well together, but we don't realize that we are offending people with what we are saying. So something that is normally said in America is well accepted here. It's all fine, everybody's happy, no harm done, and your relationship maintains after the session. But I've seen from working in different countries that at the time, things might seem that they're going well and everyone is fine, but then you find out afterwards, oh, someone was actually offended by the thing you thought was just a normal thing to do. So, and that can be really hard, because how do you determine where the culture clashes are? And so that may be part of the brave space, is to say to the participants and the facilitators, okay, look, there's a high risk of culture clash here. And we need open-mindedness throughout. And if someone is hurt by something, well, here's how we can address it. But yeah, I think it's very important to discover what the culture clashes can be and how to address them to minimize harm while maximizing joy in the session and maximize learning.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. And I've never been quiet for so long. So thank you for also teaching me how to shut up sometimes. Thank you. I appreciate so much. You've given me great ideas. And I'm sure one of the days when we meet again, I'll tell you what I've done so far.
Can I just add something on to what Danielle said? And that is, you might want to start your training by going over what you had done the last training and asking people who have come in, did you try anything? What worked and what didn't? maybe, and that's a good way for you to then identify future topics.
Oh, Virginia. In there at the end, Danielle.
Just one last point to add to that, which is that I understand what Irene was saying earlier when she said that participants can be very indirect. And so what I would add to Virginia's suggestion is that when inviting participants to talk about what didn't work, I would provide an anonymous method to give that feedback, because otherwise there's a sensitive issue of pride where, oh, I am now admitting to the group something that didn't work, and we're all here to learn, but there's still a sense of pride and saving face. And so the anonymous method might be more effective with that particular thing.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. So we have, oh, go ahead, Irene. What do you want to say?
No,
Right.
I'm happy. I'm very happy. Thank you, everybody. And thank you for your time. I appreciate it so much. Yeah.
So we have another 17 minutes. If someone wanted to pose another question, we can work through it. All I have left is sort of a reflection on what we've done today. And I guess in keeping with that, I'd like to ask, is there anything else you want to talk about around elegant steps? Is there anything that you feel needs to be addressed before you leave the session that you wanted to get out of the session before we move on to the sort of final reflection and wrap up bit?
One of the things, and this is, I don't know why I've become so highly in tune with this, all of the sessions I've been to in MyFest seem to always bring up, when we're talking about inclusion, we're talking about different cultures, we're talking about different models, the time situation. I mean, even with Irene's example, there's always this question, and what you're really talking about with the elegant step is there's I think an anticipation that you go to a session and you learn it immediately.
Mm.
And it's that smaller step. If you're too quick trying to go up the steps before people have really mastered the one, then that'll be it. They won't go any further. And they'll either be frustrated, so they won't try it, or they'll just turn away completely. And I'm just wondering what all of you think about. How do you anticipate the time? I think that's something that we all forget, is how do you manage that time expectation?
You mean in making sure people are ready, or giving them time to come with you?
All of the above.
Yeah. I think Irene and I might have similar approaches. I do a lot of it by explaining, like I start almost I don't know why I didn't do it this one. I always start most of my training by being like, you won't finish today. I'm really sorry. If you came here thinking you'd be done, I wouldn't be doing my job if you thought you'd learned everything about whatever the topic is by the time you left. My job is to give you tools to keep exploring from where we are, et cetera, et cetera. So I do a lot of verbal reassurance, I think, that wherever you are is fine. It's reflecting on that, and then, you know, continuing to take what steps you need to go where you need to go, is what is our actual goal. So I think I do a lot around secondary learning objectives. So for example, in the program I have founded and helped run still, one of our questions is, how do we want people to feel? So it's not just what do they want them to learn. And in fact, that question is on some level for some of our stuff more important. So I ask people, please don't put too much pressure on the academic side. This is more about X. So for me, it's about maybe it was before Brave Space was as much a thing people discuss, but for me, it is a little bit about laying the foundations of people feeling like, oh, wait, I'm okay. I can keep going. And then if they bump into a problem, it's like, it's not me, it's my context, or this happens to everyone. And what I think is really interesting is they've done a lot of research into belonging and interventions to support belonging. And they found that they can be really small, 30-minute online reflection things. as long as two things. One, if it normalizes the experience as something that isn't individually the fault of the individual, but the context that they're existing in. So it's not your fault you're struggling. Everyone struggles with transition, for example. And then two, if there's a continuous line of support after. So the intervention doesn't work on its own. And I think I try and keep those two things in mind. We're all here together, and it is very rarely our fault, you know, where you happen to be. There's so many things going on. So it's important to recognize that that means that it's not all on you, and you can keep, you know, what you can do is what you can do, and you just keep moving forward. And then secondly, I want people to feel that either explicitly because they're part of a longer term program, or implicitly because of the attitudes of those teaching them, that there's continued help out there, you know, that even if it's just sort of that amorphous feeling of community. So I approach it that way. I put a lot of effort into the community aspect. But I don't know how Danielle or Irene might think about it. Or if that was even helpful, Virginia.
That was very helpful.
Yeah,
Very
I
helpful.
too explain a lot of things. Because and I keep on going back to my participants or whoever is there to find out if they need any help, but I don't do it by making them feel like they're less of participants or they're less of learners. And I just say, if you are lost, it's okay to be lost, but we are coming back to find you. I use reassuring words as we move on. But I also, because there's a course that I facilitate at the University of Cape Town, I also write to them individually, especially people who struggle a bit, because quite a number of the people who come are scared of technology. So I write to them individually and tell them, can we have a session where we go through what we did, just the two of us? And if you want to invite someone else, let me know who it is that I can invite to this session. So I do that kind of thing because I realize that I also get, some people like myself get embarrassed if the way I'm called out feels like I'm being belittled. It might, like, oh, Danielle, what you were saying, the clash of the cultures. You might just call up someone because you know them and you've done this with them, but someone else might say, oh God, is that how she talks to people? So this is the wrong place. So I try to be very cautious about the way I talk to people, the way I encourage them, the way I ask them to see where they are. So that's how I do it. But I explain a lot of things over and over, and I tell the others who are ahead that it's okay if they move forward and we can catch up, you know. So it's interesting. Thank you. Virginia, I cut you short. You are saying something.
I wonder if something this group can take away to think about in terms of elegant steps too is like, I know I carry a lot of that in my own person, that reassurance. Yes. So I try and help other people have similar habits and practices, but like sometimes it just doesn't work the same way, right? Some people have sort of certain manners and things that can make it easier or harder to do that kind of work. And so I am wondering now, thank you for your question, Virginia, about what would be an elegant step for me in the work I'm doing that could acknowledge that need without requiring, you know, like the very smiley American in my UK context to be there. Because I speaking of culture clashes, I can get away with not a lot, but like I can be like, oh, I didn't know, even though I've lived here since 2008. Or it's okay for me to be smiley and super keen because I'm American. So, you know, I can get away with some of the stuff that culturally may be difficult for others. So for me, I'm going to start thinking, I'm going to take away from this. I'm going to start thinking about like trying to unpick what it is so that I can help other people do it within their own context and strengths. Because it's a really important question. How do you make sure there's time? And I think we could build it in better. Speaking of trainings and things like that. Yeah.
Well, and I think Americans especially, we're so like Americans. I also studied in Switzerland So it's
Mhm.
like, okay, these are the time constraints and you should be done by this time. And if you aren't, oh, well, what's wrong with you? We need to fix you on that. And I think that other cultures, I've worked in Latin America, they're much more laid back. But then there are other constraints, institutional constraints, where they're like, well, you know, it's taking too long for them to get to this. And what do you mean you need to develop a relationship with them? Just do it, you know, and but you can't do that in Latin America. So it's sort of, I'm finding more and more this whole question of time really affects learning, I think. If you push too hard or you don't push enough, and you know, giving time for reflection, but at the same time actually getting something done within that amount of time that you're given together. So to me, it's just one of those things that we ignore as global educators. We just assume everyone's on the same time and have the same time expectations. And I'm thinking that that's something in a lot of models, learning models, that they ignore.
So I've just updated our running definition on the Padlet. So to add that it acknowledges the need, oh, I'm going to edit it, the need for time to learn, process, and move forward, and the ask in creating that time, which is going to be different for every group or community. So I wanted to say thank you. We've got 7 minutes. The last slide, whatever it's called when you use an AI tool to build your presentation, the last thingy, is just reflecting on the steps that we took. So that's one thing I do like to do to kind of remind everyone when I do facilitation of all the work we did, because even though you won't be done, you did work very hard. So we did quite a bit of reflecting, and we define is now a word I would not use, thanks to Danielle, but we did discuss the concept of the next most elegant step, and we generated sort of a group list of what there might be, and then we worked together. It's not great, Gamma. And then we work together to kind of put our own definition in place. And all of that was really fruitful. So I want to thank you so much. I'm one of those terminally online people. I used to be on Twitter. I'm mourning Twitter. I'm now on Mastodon. And so I would like to just invite you, if you want to keep talking, to always find me there, or I'm in the MyFest Slack a lot. As well, and it was just such a pleasure. Is there anything else that would be helpful before you leave today, though?
I did want, I don't know if you all noticed, but I put a link in there to the group surveys questionnaire that I use, which I have no problem with anyone using it. Just ask, if you do, that you sort of keep my name, as this is something that I've developed myself. So I actually had something that I had developed in 1999 that someone from Harvard had asked if they could use. And now I've seen it actually published under different people's names after that. So just, I'm not a big, let me be the one that it's my name. I don't mind sharing it, but I don't necessarily want people to use my work under their name.
No, that's really hard in teaching, where people tend to pick up little bits and etc., and then you forget where you got it from, and
right
things, or don't forget and just forget to
well,
cite.
yes, exactly. So and I don't mind if they share it on the internet, but when they're actually publishing it as if it's their idea, that's when I'm sort of like, okay, I was the first one to, because I've looked at the dates, and so, but this, I think it's really useful to start a discussion. It's not necessarily, and to get people thinking about group processes.
Yeah. No, it looks fab. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for coming, Danielle. Thank you for helping Irene, and for your jazz during our break.
Thank you.
Yeah, and it was wonderful to see you all. I'm sure I'll see you throughout my fest. I was saying at the beginning to Irene that hopefully my work schedule will calm down. I don't know if it's reached any other shores, but Manchester's had a cyber incident. Someone got into our system, so I've had so many meetings with the word cyber in the subject heading. Then those are slowly slowing down. So I'm hoping to see more people at my fest. You'll definitely see my children. They're major my fest fans. And yeah, it's just been a real pleasure. So thank you very much. And I'll see you around.
Thank you everyone for coming. Please give us some feedback. I've
Yes.
shared the link in the, yes.
Yeah, sorry, Irene. Do feedback. Otherwise, Maha will ask. And speaking of Irene having her group who don't want to upset her, I'd like desperately, obviously don't want to upset Maha. So please feel free to feedback. Thank